Hi there, Nancy Mueller here. Welcome to another Life is All About Choices. Today I have my beautiful friend Erica, and I am so excited to share her with you. And yes, I know, I say this every week, but you're in for a treat because today we're going to be talking about divorce. But you can tell by the tone of my voice that we're going to share some tips, tools, and information so that if you are in the slumps of divorce, meaning you have really low energy, you're sad, you're down on yourself, we hope to change that during this episode. Erica, welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, I just love you, girlfriend. I just love you, and I'm glad that we decided to do this conversation. Please tell everybody who you are, what you do, and why you're so fabulous.
I love you too, Nancy. And I am Erica Blocker. I am a certified life coach. I'm also a best-selling author, a speaker, and I am the host of the Moms with Dreams show, which is a podcast. It's 4 years old already. It's like 4.5 years old.
Yay! Congratulations and happy anniversary.
Thank you. So I am fabulous because I have learned how to, as they say, make lemonade out of lemons. When my life was disrupted and I had a very devastating divorce. That divorce, although I felt like at the time it almost killed me, it actually was the thing that actually saved my life and gave me a second chance and helped me to just reevaluate everything about my life and discover my purpose. So that's why I'm so excited to be here and to talk with you and your listeners and the viewers today.
Well, Erica, you and I have known each other for several years, and we've come in and out of each other's lives, and we share things. And you and I are both divorced. We've been through that challenge, and that used to be our story that we would share in a very disempowering way, in a very negative way, because when you're going through it or when you're approaching it and knowing that it's looming in front of you, it can feel like your life is over. Like, I know I've often said, going through my divorce, I felt like every day I was walking through Jello. Everything just seemed so surreal and life just seemed so difficult to push through. But this is why I'm really excited to talk to you today, because you've got some really great information about it's not about pushing through. It's about releasing and letting go. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, helping anyone who watches this conversation know that there is life after divorce. And hopefully there's something that we're going to be able to share today that will help you wherever you are.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I remember that feeling too, Nancy. And I likened it to feeling like I was standing in the center of a room and all of a sudden someone pulled the rug from underneath me and I fell on my face, flat on my face. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how can I get up? And every time I tried to get up, I would like slip and fall back down. And it just, it was just weird. Everything was unfamiliar. I just wanted my life to be normal again.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but even though after the divorce and when you really start to be honest with yourself about, what was going on in the marriage, because if a marriage ends in divorce, there are things that you want to look at. We tend to look at things in hindsight and just remember all of the good things or wonderful, or maybe we feel like we were wronged or we're holding on to that anger or that vengeance. But as you start to look at it and you reflect back, sometimes it can be difficult to just maybe take culpability for some of the things along the way that you knew at the time, hey, maybe I should address this, but you didn't. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's what ends in divorce, because just because somebody's having problems, it doesn't mean that your marriage is headed for divorce. But what I'm saying is, when you get to a point where you start to be reflective, honestly reflective, it's a huge release to start looking at maybe just peeling back what the relationship was like. Did you find that?
I did. And and it took me a while to get to that point, because at first, you have to go through the sadness and then the anger and all the five stages of grief that we go through when we're mourning the loss of our marriage. But like you said, when I did an honest reflection of what my life was like, I became so grateful because I was no longer in that situation. And I was holding on to the good memories and like totally like embellishing them and forgetting about the days when I was left in the house by myself with the kids, and the nights when he was out and I didn't know where he was, and all the misery and the sadness, the lies, everything that it's so funny. Like you said, we as human beings, we tend to hold on to the good things and we forget about the bad things. But then when I was honest with myself, I was just really grateful to be released from that situation. And as I said earlier, to be able to have a second chance, because I felt like had I stayed in that marriage, I would have been miserable. Because I was able to get out of it, I got a second chance to like restart my life again.
And you're doing so much with mompreneurs, helping moms with your mom university, and just helping them see what's available to them as a mother, because sometimes we as women, we tend to think, okay, my first duty is to my children. I'm a mom first and then everything else. And yes, our children do take precedent over just about everything else, but it's so important for us to learn to put ourselves first, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, everything else is going to fall apart. And if we're not being honest and truthful with ourselves, likewise, things are going to be falling apart. When did you, and before I ask that question, I was going to say too, I want to just say right here and now that no matter what Erica and I say today, wherever you are in the process of your divorce, thinking about it, going through it, or putting it behind you, and wherever you are in the process of how you feel about your divorce, you are exactly where you need to be emotionally, spiritually, mentally. And please, please, please give yourself permission to be where you are, and don't let anyone tell you that you should be over it by now, or you should do this, or you should do that, because this is your life. And if you need to sit and cry for 6 hours, 12 hours, 3 days, whatever, that's okay, because maybe that's what your soul really needs you to do. So please, I just wanted to say that right at the beginning of the conversation. Please take whatever time, space, energy, healing you need for you, and do that, even if it means that you're vegging in front of TV for 4 days in a row and you feel like you can't get off the couch, because there's also therapy in that as well, because you're basically turning off your conscious mind and you're tuning into something else. And obviously if you're doing it for weeks or months at a time, you want to reach out to someone. But if there are times when you just feel like you need to just drop out and not think about things, please give yourself permission to be wherever you are. I want to say that.
Absolutely. And because that was so great, Nancy, I totally forgot your question.
No, I actually was going to start a question, and then
Okay.
and then I stopped myself, because I felt like, you and I, where we are on this path of our divorce, we have gone through the divorce. That's what we'll call the event, the divorce. And then we had a story around it, the story of what our marriage was like, why we got divorced. And, everybody has a story about numerous things in their life. And how you share the story, meaning how you talk about it, and the feelings and emotions that are attached to your story, are going to weigh very heavily on how you get through each day, how you walk through each day. Do you feel really excited and happy and loving and woo, life is awesome? Or do you feel down and sad and hopeless and angry and frustrated and vengeful? Those are negative feelings. And so negative feelings cause us to vibrate on a very low frequency. So when you share your story about something and it's full of negative emotions and feelings because you haven't yet released those negative feelings and emotions, the more you share that story, the more you're staying in that energy. So once you're able to release the negativity around it and go beyond your story, so that when you do share the story, you share it with a positive energy and vibration, and a positiveness about, hey, you know what? Yes, this happened. And then I loved myself enough to work on it, work on me, do the inner work, take culpability for what I did in the relationship and throughout the divorce, And now here I am. And this is what Erica and I have both, a place we've gotten to, which is why we felt like this was such a really great conversation to have today. So, Erica, what do you tell people that you're coaching about, when they come to you and say, no, my life is over. I just want to be a mom again. I just want my husband back. I just want whatever. They'd rather go back to the negative and the not so great lifestyle rather than be divorced and be alone. What do you tell them about that?
Well, I tell them to first be honest with themselves. And sometimes when you say those things, you think you believe that because those are your feelings and your emotions. And we're guided women, as women, we are guided by our emotions. We're such emotional creatures. And it's hard for us to discern between emotional and rational,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes I just allow her to be in that moment for a little bit. And then we kind of talk about why does she feel that way? And what are some of the things that she feels like she's missing? And why is she longing to go back? And then we kind of move into the direction of, okay, so how can you recreate those things, but in a way that it's more powerful to you, in a way that you don't need that old toxic relationship, and kind of go forward with that. And I feel like sometimes there's so many things attached to divorce that it's often in addition to our emotions, it's not even us. Sometimes we feel shameful, right? So we're ashamed to say, oh, I'm divorced now. Then we feel like we've lost a part of our identity, because as a wife, I was just thinking about this morning, it's so ironic that when you lose the title of wife, especially if that's what you highly identified yourself as, like as your main thing, it's really difficult to let go. That's like letting go of a part of yourself. And that's why I can understand when women say they want to go back, because they want to find that part of them again. They feel like they've lost something very near and dear. But I just help them understand that sometimes, and I don't want to offend anyone, but I believe in God. And I know that sometimes he will interrupt our lives and he'll take us down different paths that we thought different from what we thought we should be going on, to help us to get where he intended for us to go. And sometimes that looks like something devastating and life-changing, like a divorce, and something we would never have expected. But on the other side of that pain, and on the other side of that devastation, and on the other side of that loneliness, and all of those other feelings that you're having temporarily, is your joy, is your truth, is your rediscovering of who you truly are, your identity, your power, all of those things that we often lose when we're in dysfunctional relationships. And we don't get to be our full selves because we're compromising to this other person, or we're feeling like if we speak up, our voices won't be heard, or whatever the case. Like, there's so many different things that could be going on. But I just try to help her to be present with where she is and to acknowledge those feelings. And then we try to dissect them and figure out, where is that coming from? Is it coming from a place of fear? Are you just afraid of what's next because you don't know? Afraid of being a single mom like I was petrified. I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to take care of 4 kids by myself with this income? I was only working part-time at the time, had a mortgage, had a car note, had after school program, all the other stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I was afraid that I was going to ruin my kids' lives, and that I just, I had so many different fears. But little by little, when I recognized that they were just, a figment of my imagination, that I still had power and control, that's when I realized that, you know what, I can do this. Like, I don't need to go backwards. I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to go back there. Like, that wasn't good for me. I want to move forward. So that's kind of how we work through that.
Well, and there's a couple things that I want to address in what you just said. The first one, I was thinking, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think you'd be doing all the work that you're doing as a life coach and the work with mompreneurs if you hadn't been divorced?
Absolutely not. That's why I can say that I know that my divorce helped me discover my purpose, because I had no intention on doing this. The one thing that I did want to do when I was younger, because I was a teen mom, is that I wanted to work with teen mothers at some point in my life. I haven't even gotten to that yet, but I do want to either create a program or speak to them or something where I encourage them. But no, Nancy, this is all, my divorce was a catalyst to, it was like the springboard to my dream, not my dream, but my purpose. I didn't even know this was my dream until like everything happened. And I was like, wow. Who knew?
Exactly. And then the other point that you brought up about, you know, sometimes God putting things in your way to, like, detours that we think are devastating. Like, how could this happen? And we want to blame the universe and get down on our knees and, why me? You know, why is this happening? But what's really important to understand is it's not that the universe is putting something horrible into your life, because however horrible it is how we make it, right? It is something that happened, and then the energy that we feed it makes it really horrible, mildly horrible, or a nuisance. And that sounds kind of glib, I know, but when, just like to your point, when you said, how am I going to be a single mom? How am I going to raise these kids? How am I going to get them to school? How am I going, how? And then that is the energy that you were putting into your story, the event that happened, your divorce, and making yourself very, very fearful of how in the world are you ever going to get through this. So the more energy that you're feeding it that way, the more explosive it is. And as you started realizing how powerful you are, and then you started attracting other things in your life, like you started helping other women and single moms and showing them what they could do. Now you started to see, hey, I'm really good at this. I'm really powerful at this. And as you started to accept that, then you were able to let go of the negative thoughts, feelings, and emotions about your divorce. Would you say that I've got that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And also when I just took an assessment of where I was, like I wasn't ruining my kids' lives. I wasn't, a lot of the things that I was putting on my shoulders and taking ownership of didn't belong to me. So it wasn't that I wanted a divorce. It was kind of like the way things happened. So I had to make the best of it. And that's what I did. So I realized that, yeah, I mean, first of all, by talking to other women, I learned that I wasn't alone. Although at the moment, you know, when you're going through it, you feel like, oh, no one gets me because
Right.
everyone around me is married. I don't have any friends who are divorced or anyone who I know personally. Now I do, but at the time I didn't. And that's another thing. I started to find other women who could relate to me, who could, you know, I could share my stories with, and kind of like we could support each other. So that was very important, to connect with other women who related to me. And I found those women with intention. Like I remember it was the end of 2012, I believe. I was going into 2013, and I made a conscious commitment to connect with other powerful women who were either where I wanted to be or going in that direction, who could help me, could guide me, could lead me. And that's exactly what I did. Like from that point on, I just started connecting with other women who were just not necessarily divorced, but powerful women, women who I admired, women who I could learn from, women who could help pull me up out of my own stuff and help me to see that, you know, there's so much more to life. Like this is just one little incident in your life, Erica, and it's really a blessing. It's not something you should be like, you know, devastated and like, oh my gosh, life is over about. It should be like really like a celebration.
Well, and you know, society wise, culturally wise, depending on our beliefs about divorce, meaning the beliefs that you've created from childhood on, like, what do you think about divorce? Like, oh, divorce is wrong, or oh, it disrupts a family, or it means I failed, or, you know, whatever your beliefs are, society can feed into that. And one of the things that I always thought was interesting when I was going through my divorce as well as after, it doesn't matter what kind of application you fill out, whether it's for a credit card or whatever, there's always a box, Mr., Mrs., Miss, or married, not married, divorced. And it's like, well, if you're not married, why does it matter to you why I'm not married, why I'm single? But isn't it interesting how society has things in place that will remind us of the so-called hierarchy of society, I guess.
Very interesting. I always get annoyed with that too. I'm like, why does it matter? Same question I ask myself, even now, like now that I'm totally over it, still, I'm just like, why does it matter if I'm divorced or not? Who cares?
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe we should all have like this D on our chest or something. I don't know. And then we could just say, oh, hey girl, yeah, let's have this conversation.
Come over here. You're in our club.
Exactly. So, Erica, as you know, when I talk to people, I usually share, I see divorce as 3 stages: thinking about it, going through it, or putting it behind you. The divorce is over and you're putting it behind you. Now, I believe, this is my belief, and I might rankle a few, people here when I say this, but I believe that every married woman at some time or another thinks about divorce. And it's not necessarily because she really wants to end her marriage, but sometimes we have those thoughts of the road not taken, what if, how would my life be different? And it's usually on days of overwhelm, or when something's, I don't know, maybe there's a challenge within the relationship or marital problems of some kind, and you think, oh my gosh, how are we going to get through this? And then your mind goes to, oh, does this mean divorce? And then you start thinking of all the ramifications of divorce. So I wanted to point that out, because if you are watching this and you have had some thoughts about divorce and you're punishing yourself for it, meaning that you're saying, oh my gosh, why did I think of that? I must be a horrible person. How could my mind even go there? Give yourself permission to just say, it's not necessarily that you're doing something wrong. It's just your higher self giving you the opportunity to say, you know what, you have a challenge right now, and the way your mind is working, you believe that there's only one of 2 options: to continue to struggle or get divorced. You're not seeing all of the other opportunities that the universe has available. And this is just, like I said, your higher self tapping you on the shoulder saying, let's take a look at this. Stop ignoring it. And let's just take a look at why you feel it's gotten to this point. And I feel that if every woman would give herself permission to have that conversation with herself, and then maybe her spouse, if she wants to, there could be a lot of really powerful conversations between husbands and wives.
I agree. And a lot of healing too.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes those feelings used to come up for me, and it was like, oh, I really felt like I wanted a divorce because I was angry. It was like in the heat of not even an argument, but just frustration. Like, ugh, I could do better. I don't want to do this anymore. And you're right. But the key to that though, Nancy, having those conversations, the key is both people have to be willing to come to the conversation with the same intention, right? Mm-hmm. So if I come to my husband like, hey, this is how I'm feeling, he needs to come with the same intention to receive what I'm sharing, and also to be open to it without judgment, so that we could figure out, how do we come to, a conclusion? How do we come to a solution to this, so that I'm not walking around, because I don't think anyone who's married wants to have constant feelings of, oh, I should get divorced. Like, there's obviously something that needs to be addressed. And so you're right, having, the 2 of you sitting down, maybe even seeing a marriage counselor or someone who's totally objective, from the situation, and can give you more insight and make you feel safe having that conversation, mm-hmm. is also helpful. But I do agree that I think, even if it's just for a split second, we've all at some point thought, oh, I should get a divorce. What happens if I get a divorce? What would it be like? Or, that kind of thing.
Yes. And then and you're exactly right, because it takes 2 people. And if you can't have that conversation with your spouse, if it brings up, I don't know, if it makes matters worse, or that is something to look at too. Like, why are you not able to have that conversation with your spouse? Because if you've gotten to a point where you feel like the only option is divorce, meaning ending the relationship, that's something that your spouse, I would hope, wants to be privy to. But if you have a spouse who doesn't want to have that conversation, or it invokes anger or problems, more problems, bigger problems, that is something to look at too. See, because we look at it as like, oh, divorce, not divorce. Having a conversation, he or she doesn't want to talk to me. And it's about, okay, each choice you make, now what comes out of that choice? And then what choice are you making based on what came out of that choice? So if you want to have a conversation and you're shut down on that, is that the kind of relationship that you want to continue having? A relationship with someone that you can't even, bare your soul and talk about, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I feel I need, or I'm mixed up, or I don't understand, or whatever it is that you're feeling. So pay attention to what comes out of your thoughts. Wouldn't you say, Erica?
Absolutely. And don't judge yourself. You're
Right.
human, right? We go in these ebbs and flows. Things are good. Sometimes things are great. That sometimes things are not so good. But we're allowed to have those different thoughts and feelings. And it's not a bad thing at all. It doesn't mean that your marriage is over, like you said earlier. It's just a part of the whole process, right? Our
Right.
journey.
Right. And imagine when you give yourself permission to have that conversation, even if it's just with yourself, and you start to realize, oh, this is what I'm thinking, but I kind of put a lid on it and squashed it and didn't allow myself to really explore it and learn more about it. um, it's very, very empowering. And it doesn't mean that you're plotting, it just means that you're really trying to know yourself better. And the thing is everything is an inside job. We all have to do the inner work. We all have to take 100% responsibility for every single choice that we make and every single thought that we have. And when something goes wrong, which nothing goes wrong, it's just positive or negative, but nothing goes wrong, it just is. And however this is and how you react to it depends on what's going to be this is it after that. So whatever's going on, pay attention to the feelings that are coming up for you. What are you feeling? Are they negative feelings? Like, are you judging yourself? Are you being self-critical? Are you ashamed? Are you remorseful that something happened within the relationship that you just can't get past? These are the feelings and emotions that your higher self is giving you the opportunity to look at. And if you continue to put a lid on it, so to speak, it's going to show up in another area of your life. And I know for me, I was the only, I have five siblings. There's four brothers and sisters. And for me, I was like, yeah, I was really proud of it. I'm like, I am the only one that's never been divorced. This is great. This is awesome. So I didn't even realize that sense of pride in a job well done or well accomplished. But after the divorce, what I didn't realize is that to obtain that sense of pride, that accomplishment, the things that I didn't allow myself to look at in order to have that accomplishment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And for me, when I hear you say that, to me, it's also about, I know there were moments when I was faking it. Like I was in my marriage, and from the outside, people looking in thought, oh, she has the perfect life. They live in the suburbs, they have the nice house, 2 cars, kids, all this stuff. But I wasn't happy. And a part of me was willing to hold on to that facade for my children, because I thought that was the thing that was best, to keep them in a 2-parent household. I didn't want my children to grow up in a broken home where they had to visit their dad on the weekends, and so on and so forth, and all the everything that children go through with the divorce. And then for me, I was just like, oh, I would be too embarrassed, or what would that look like? Oh my gosh. So there was a part of me that felt like, if I can't be honest with myself, like I knew at some point that if I stayed in the situation, that I wouldn't make my children happy. They'd be miserable too, because kids can pick up on that. Like they know when things aren't right, even when we try to cover it up and make it look
Right.
like things are good. Kids have that sense, and they can feel energy just like we can. They might not be able to express it,
Right.
but they can tell when something's not right. And I didn't want them to grow up in that type of environment. So ultimately I had to become, again, goes back to being honest with yourself and true to yourself. And what is it that you really want? What's most important to you? And is it fulfilling an image that society has created, or standards that they've set for us as women, to say that once you get married and have children, it's wrong to get divorced, or you should wear a big D on your chest because you're like the Scarlet of, the town or whatever, I
Yeah.
don't, it's just time for us to identify with our own selves and stop comparing and stop being afraid to be your true, like own your truth. And if you're unhappy in your marriage, I'm definitely not saying just go get a divorce. I'm saying
Right.
that over time, if things just aren't right and you've given it everything you've got and it's just not working and you're still like, it's just not getting better, then it's time for you to make a true assessment of how long are you going to stay in this position? Life is too short for us to be miserable. You know, life is super long when you're miserable, by the way. We all hear.
That's the truth. That's the truth. That's the truth.
It's like you don't want to waste your life in a situation just because other people say that's where you should be or because you feel pressured or whatever it is. Just, you know, be honest with yourself and love yourself enough to make a decision that's best for you.
And you know what's interesting, that all of the things that we resist or don't want to look at or shove down and, you know, put in a box and put in the back of the closet, all those things that we don't want to look at if we're having challenges within our marriage, we have to look at them, every single one of them, if it gets to a point of divorce. So, you know, whatever you think you're putting off or, I don't know, just like, oh no, I'll think about that tomorrow, you know, like Scarlett O'Hara, I'll think about it tomorrow. Whatever you're not paying attention to, it will come back around and say, hey, you know what? You forgot me. You left me over here and you didn't pay attention to this, because feelings and emotions kind of, they linger in our senses, and, you know, they can make us feel, I don't know, lethargic or not good. And we're walking around going, why do I feel so crappy today? What, I should be happy. Things are going well. I don't really understand. And it's because of a feeling or emotion that you have refused to look at or resisted looking at, and you just don't want to admit that it's going on. And it's going to just keep coming back around and saying, are you ready now? Are you ready now? And this is why I feel it's very, very important to be so honest with yourself, to have honest conversations with yourself. You don't necessarily have to have them with another person, but just be honest, know yourself, and be willing to do the inner work, because it's so easy for us to blame the other person. Oh, he did this, or he had an affair, or he, I don't know, whatever. We go and blame all of these things. And when you're in the mix of it, it is very easy to do that, you know, grab a hold of that person and say, we wouldn't be falling apart if you hadn't done this or if you hadn't done that. But like I said, it's so important to stop and take a look at, okay, so why are you being so critical of yourself? Why are you allowing yourself to be with that person? And now that you're not going to be with that person, how are you judging yourself based on how you're not going to be with that person? Because until you can let go of whatever it is that that person did, I'm gonna do that in air quotes, that's holding you back from your true expression, your true releasing, letting go, and actually getting to the point where you can share the story without the negative feelings and emotions. And when you can do that, now you're sharing the story from a place of positivity. And Erica, I think you do this so eloquently with the women that you work with.
Thank you, Nancy. It's been a process for sure, because there was a point where I couldn't even talk about it without crying. Mm-hmm. So you talk about negative emotions. I also feel like sadness was a big part of what I dealt with. For a long time, I didn't get angry. And my therapist was worried. She was like, well, do you think, were you angry yet? And I was like, no, I'm not angry. I'm just so sad. I can't stop crying. It was just so devastating in that way. Mm-hmm. And you're right. But you said something earlier that I think is key. And I just wanted to reiterate that. It's that you can't rush the process. So no matter where you are emotionally, just let yourself be there, because one of the things that I just couldn't stand was I hated being sad. So like, I'm a happy person, I'm carefree, I want to enjoy life. And I hated being so sad. I wanted to just be able to walk over to a light switch, flick it up, and then I was better. Like, I didn't want to go through the process, but I learned there's no way around it.
No.
And you can't heal what you don't feel. So if you don't allow yourself to feel that and go through it, you can't heal from it.
Exactly. That's a good one. I've never heard that before. You can't heal what you don't feel. I'm going to remember that. That's a tweetable moment, Hashtag.
That's not mine, honestly, though. It's one of my guests for my podcast. She was talking about it, and she said feeling of allowing you to something about what I just said. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
reworded it, but yeah, you can't heal what you don't feel.
Well, and that's the wonderful thing about what you were saying earlier, finding your tribe, women who have experienced what you're going through, and not women who have experienced what you're going through, but have done the inner work and have released the negative feelings and emotions and are now sharing their story from a place of empowerment. That's who you want to latch onto, not someone who's going through the same feelings and emotions that you are. And then the two of you just sit down and, polish off a pint of Ben and Jerry's together every other Friday. We don't want to do that, because we're not about commiserating.
Right.
We're really about, lending a hand to anyone who is in a space that we can relate to and say, oh my gosh, yes, I know, I've been there. And I think that's maybe one of the worst things we could say to a person. Oh, I totally understand, I've been there. Because when you're in it, you just want to scratch their eyes out. Don't you think? Like, no, you haven't. You've not been here. You don't understand what's going on. This is horrible.
Well, for me, it was the exact opposite. I didn't have anyone who could say that. So I was just so angry because I'm like, no one gets me. I think either way, it's like you still feel like if they say they understand, you're like, no, you don't. And if they say they have no clue, you're like, see, no one understands.
And that's it, because, we're looking for our negative feelings and emotions to be validated.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're looking for. So when we are angry or feeling vengeful, we really do purposely go out and try to find someone to validate our negativity. And unfortunately, so many children are caught in the crossfire with that,
Right.
Like, oh, you're choosing sides, or, oh, you're choosing him over me, or whatever. And so when we put our children in the middle, we have to really, again, take 100% responsibility for, are we ready to do the inner work, and how much damage control are we creating? How much damage are we creating? And then what is the damage control that now needs to be done based on our, going off the rails?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a whole thing about that, but I don't even know if we have enough time. But I will say this, that when you're dealing with a person who's not on the same level, like mentally and emotionally and intellectually, it's really hard to manage some of that damage control or damage as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my case. Like, I had no idea how immature my ex was until we actually went through the divorce, and he was dragging the kids into it, but I didn't know he was dragging them into it. So I was not buffering the things he was saying. I wasn't like, deconstructing the lies and stuff, because I had no idea about it. It was just like he was building up all of this nonsense, and it was just so hard. So what I will say in that respect is that, depending on how old your children are,
Mm-hmm.
definitely have age appropriate conversations with them, but just be honest with them about, as much as you can, basically based on their age and what you feel is safe for them to understand. But let them know what's going on, so that they don't feel like they're the reason why
Mm-hmm.
the divorce is happening, or they don't feel like you love them any less, or that they're unsafe, because when there's a lot of calamity going around in their presence, it's just like, oh my gosh, what's happening? They feel nervous and afraid. You want to calm them and keep them feeling like they're in a safe environment, but just being honest with them as much as you can. And my purpose was, I thought I was sheltering them, because I was like, they don't need to know, they're children, I don't want to involve them. But it turned out not being good, because, like I said, my ex was not on the same level as I was, and he felt like, oh, let me drag them into this with us, so that I can look like the victim and she can look like the aggressor or whatever. So
Well,
I just
and
wanted to
my children were adults by this time, but I still found myself not sharing what I was feeling with them, because I wanted to protect them. I wanted to shield them. And what's interesting in hindsight now, I realized that, I was doing exactly what I would counsel a client not to do. We are not here to take on the journey of another person. So if our child needs to experience something, because that's part of their spiritual growth, and we don't share what's happening, like you said, though, with age appropriate conversation, of course, then we think, oh no, I'm just protecting little Susie or little Johnny, or I can't let them know what's going on. But for children who are in the sidelines and being kept in the dark, they're making it up then, because they're catching that energy. They're feeling that negative vibration and that negative energy. And so they're just making it up. They're saying, oh, well, this happens or that happens. And so you're really making it worse for yourself if you can't have an honest conversation with your child. And then again, like I said, it just depends on their age, and you have to be very, very mindful that you're having a conversation that's just truly truthful, not trying to get them on your side or, prove that your spouse is the bad one or something. It's just about, what, this is how I'm feeling right now, and I don't know what to do with it. I love you. And I'm just happy that you're there for me. And, and then be open, because sometimes kids can have such valuable information that when it comes from them, we dismiss it because they're children. But really, they're very wise because they see things that we don't really realize they see.
Yeah. What does it say? From a babe's mouth or something like that?
Yes, from the mouths of babes.
Yes,
absolutely.
From the mouths of babes. It's so true.
Yes.
My children teach me things all the time. It's always so funny to me. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and I always say, if you want to know something, ask a millennial, because they've got all the answers, right? And so we think about it the same thing. What can our children teach us? So much. And even, like I said, my children were adults at the time, and I still found myself just wanting to not share what was going on, not let them know, the hurts and how I was feeling. And so then what I'm doing is I'm taking on my negative emotions and their negative emotions. And wow, is it any wonder then at some point you're just like a train wreck waiting to happen?
Right. Yeah.
So Erica, what would you suggest for someone who's maybe at a point where they're listening to this conversation, they're watching this conversation, and they're saying, okay, maybe what these women are talking about, maybe, just maybe, they know what they're talking about. And if they do, how do I go from where I am to maybe just the path to get to where they are? What would you suggest?
Well, going back to what we said earlier about being honest, I wouldn't make any hasty decisions. I would give yourself some time to really be with where you are. And sometimes it's just a matter of just taking time off, maybe taking some time by yourself to think and have time alone to really reflect on what you want. Because, in some cases, it's not a bad thing. Like, it's not like something had to happen to lead to divorce. Sometimes you grow apart. And so we just have to just know where we are with it, right? And then once we know where we are, take the next step, which could be one of many things. It could be having a conversation with your spouse. It could be talking to a divorce lawyer to understand the laws in the states you live in or the country that you live in, what to expect during a divorce. It could be looking at your finances. There are a myriad of things that you can do, but I would say also seeking out maybe the help of a therapist or a marriage counselor for the two of you, if you feel like that's going to help you, or just getting help on your own to have someone to support you through the next steps. There are plenty, there's so many counselors out there who focus on divorce and marriage. And there's also life coaches like Nancy and myself. And I would just say, it's really hard to tell you exactly what to do, but I would say first, know exactly, kind of figure out where you are first and what you're feeling. And whatever that is, you can pray over it too and wait and ask for guidance too. I would say that definitely pray over it and receive whatever comes through your prayer. And whatever decision you make, just know that make sure that it's right for you. Because no one else knows your situation. No one else is living your life, and no one else knows what your desires are and what you need to feel whole and happy. So I would just say, first, start from a place of being true and honest with yourself and taking time to really figure out what it is that you want and how to go just, be okay with whatever decision you make too.
I love that. And also, I'd like to say that if you are putting it behind you, if you're at that point where the divorce is final and now you're wondering what's next, where do I go? And your friends are encouraging you, well, you can get out there and you can start dating. Before you start dating, make sure that you know yourself. Make sure that you know why you made the choices that you did in the marriage, so that you're not choosing to date your ex-husband or your ex-wife, because that's what we do. We don't realize that we are creatures of habit, and we make choices based on basically habit. The subconscious is, running the show. And so if you start dating someone who's similar to your ex, because it's like a comfort zone, like, oh yeah, I remember it felt good just to sit and watch a movie together. Or so pay very close attention to the habits that you're repeating, and just make sure that they're positive habits. It's empowering habits, and not something that you're just falling into because you're afraid to be alone, or you don't know what the future holds and you'd rather go through it with someone than by yourself. Make sure that you are strong. Make sure that you are empowered and you've done the inner work to know who you are and what your sole purpose is here on this earth. Because when you can do that, then you will start to make choices going forward from a place of empowerment, rather than giving your power away because there's fear taking over.
Absolutely. I agree. The inner work is so important.
It is. Erica, this has been such a delightful conversation. I mean, and I feel so blessed that we can have this conversation with the empowerment that we do, both you and I, and know that anyone listening to this, what we've been through is now a source of empowerment, maybe even inspiration for someone who's still having a lot of negative feelings and emotions going through the ups and downs of their relationship. And I'm just very grateful that you're here.
I'm grateful too, Nancy. And I also want to say that I'm grateful. And I think that we should be even more grateful for ourselves, because there are so many women who go through divorce. I was just thinking about this the other day too, like the fact that we're able to and willing to share our stories and our testimonies and with the purpose of helping others, because there's so many women who go through divorce and never talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like the more that we share our stories, the more healing we can create in the world for ourselves and also for others. And it's just so important. And I'm also very grateful for this conversation.
Thank you. Well, and I am a true believer that when we share our story, we give others the opportunity to share their story. And the more we share our story from a place of empowerment, see, that again raises the vibrational energy within us. And people are attracted to that energy. And they may not really understand it or know what it's about, but they just know, oh my gosh, when I'm around that woman, I feel so wonderful. I don't know what it is, but I want to be, or drink or eat whatever she's drinking or eating that makes her feel so fabulous. And we deserve that, every single one of us. And any of us that have been in a place of disempowerment and are now speaking from a place of empowerment, and you can share the story, you're helping more than you realize you're helping. Even if you just have a 10-minute conversation with someone, it can make all the difference in the world for that person to know they're not alone.
Absolutely. That was what I wanted most when I was going through it, was just to know that I wasn't alone. And that was my whole mission, to let women know you don't need to suffer in silence.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Erica, can you share how people can get a hold of you and find you and where to connect with you?
Sure. Thank you for asking. I am on Facebook. I have a personal page. It's Erica Blocker, and I live in Burlington, New Jersey. So there might be a couple of other Ericas, but you'll find me there. And my business page is also called Erica Blocker. I also have Moms with Dreams University on Facebook. And then on Instagram, I am Erica Blocker, the number 4 for my 4 children. And you can also find my website, which is ericablocker.com. And I'm on Twitter too, under Moms with Dreams, and LinkedIn under Moms with Dreams.
And because Erica can be spelled a couple different ways, it's
Oh, yes.
Erica.
I forgot.
Erica. That's okay. You know, I just want to make sure they can find you.
Yes, Erica Blocker. B as in boy, Locker, just like it says on the screen.
There you go. All right. And I really, really do hope that anyone watching this conversation, we've given you something to think about. We've empowered you in some way. We've shared some of our story, and because we're sharing it from a place of empowerment, I really do, it is my wish for you, my hope for you, that you will take this as the gift that it's intended to be and receive it and be good to yourself. And just start asking yourself, okay, why am I so fabulous? And then just let it go from there, because you are absolutely fabulous. Every one of us is fabulous. Erica, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure.
And if you like this conversation, subscribe to the channel here. Life is all about choices. And please, please, please share it with someone, because you never know what someone's going through. And maybe the 2 seconds that it takes you to share this on social media, you could be changing a person's life, because you're sharing something that resonated with you. And trust me, there's a reason for that. There are no mistakes in the universe. So if it's calling to you, it's calling to someone else as well. So get out there and share it. In the meantime, remember, life is all about choices. This is Nancy Mueller saying ciao for now.